Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. I could easily retire if I had a quarter for every time I have driven across the Egner's Ferry Bridge, a span that made national news a few weeks ago when an ocean-going cargo ship hit it and knocked a span out that was 322 feet and 6 inches long, fell into the water. Since then, it's kind of faded from the news a little bit, but I was kind of curious as to when this bridge might be reopened, and most importantly, how will engineers determine if this bridge is safe and not permanently damaged? With me today to talk about that is a civil engineer from the Kentucky Department of Highways, Jim LeFevre. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Barry.
Let's just talk about how in the world, it seems to me, now let's see if I'm right about that. I'm a history teacher, not an engineer. It seems what we have now is one long pier that comes out from Aurora and stops, and a shorter pier that comes out from Fenton and stops. And I know that's not what that's designed to be, that a bridge is supposed to go all the way across and support itself. So talk about I get the physics of that. How does a bridge like that support itself?
Well, that particular span is it's called a Parker Truss, and it's a modification of a Pratt truss, and those were developed in the mid-1800s. Truss bridges really came from the need to get railroads from east to west as our nation developed, and so these marvelous inventors came up with ways that we could span long distances. And so what we had there prior to this incident was a truss. It was 322 feet 6 inches, and trusses are able to span quite large lengths. For example, you know, we're building a new bridge now across the Tennessee River that connects McCracken and Livingston counties, and one of the main span for that truss is going to be 900 feet long. So these trusses are remarkable engineering feats.
Right. Well, you know, talking about that, I believe I'm right in saying when the railroad bridge at Carroll was built, it was the world's longest bridge.
I would say that's probably true.
Incredible.
Yep.
Now, going back to the day it happened, I believe it was January 26th, maybe about a little after 8 o'clock, and you got the call, and you went and tried to recapture that moment for us.
Well, it was quite a shock. I was sitting at my house, and our public information officer, Keith Todd, called me and said, we have a bridge span in the water, Egner's Ferry Bridge. As you probably know from the news, we've been dealing a lot now with the current Tennessee River Bridge, and we've had to lower the weight limit on that bridge to 3 tons. And so what had been on my mind for several weeks is that bridge. And so it took me a second to understand and to even believe that something like this could happen. And so I immediately got dressed and went up there, and I walked all the way from the Aurora side out on the bridge.
And it was a miserable night.
It was misting rain. It was very dark, and I walked all the way out to look at this ocean-going vessel, the Delta Mariner, which was there where our truss span used to be. So it was a surreal experience.
Well, to sort of fast forward then, what is the status right now? Obviously the ship itself was taken to James Marine in Paducah for repair, and what I understand is, despite the photographs we all saw of that bridge section draped over the bow of this thing, that it was not damaged too heavily. And the last I heard was they were putting some kind of sensors on these bridge piers to see how things are. So can you tell us how things are as far as you know?
Sure. One of our immediate concerns was, you know, we have these existing piers here, and so in looking at any potential fix, what we have to know as engineers is, okay, can we use these existing piers? We need to know if they've been damaged or not. And really the answer to that question is going to dictate a lot of what our solution is going to be moving forward. And so we had an engineer dive team come in, and they dove down to the bottom of the lake. They looked at the bottom of the piers.
And how deep is the lake there, approximately?
I'm told it's about 70 feet underneath that span. So it's pretty, you know, it's pretty deep, probably deeper than most people might think. And so they took some images. They examined this for us. As a matter of fact, we just got their report yesterday, their written report yesterday. And
the verdict is?
The verdict is there is no significant damage to those existing piers. They did recommend continuing to monitor the piers for possible movement, which we've been doing for some time now anyway. And so we are going to continue to monitor those just to double check and make sure, but we're 99% confident at this point that yes, as part of the solution for putting a span back, we will be able to use these piers, and that's good news.
Well, absolutely. Then the follow-up question would be, how long would it be approximately to the point that that bridge is back in service?
Well, that's a great question.
That's a $64 question, yeah.
That's a great question, and I wish I had a really good answer for that question for you. But unfortunately, that question is hard to answer, and the reason is we are still fleshing out the potential solutions for putting this span back. Because of the length of span, it's likely that we will have to put in a temporary pier. And
now, how would you do that?
Well, the current plan is to use steel pipe piling. That pipe piling is hollow, and to use those and drive those down into the soil underneath the lake, and then to put a pier cap on there, and then that would give us a much shorter distance to span, and so we can put a temporary span across that. So we're looking at at least one, and possibly two of these temporary piers. And because of the depth of water there, and because of the time necessary to order the materials to do this, it's not something that can be done fast. And so, you know, we're looking at months, not weeks, for a solution.
So once you get these temporary piers in place, what will be the next step?
Well, then we'll have to put the superstructure part of the bridge on top of the piers, the superstructure being the load carrying members and the deck. So really right now we're looking at kind of two different options. One is there are companies out there that make pre-manufactured bridges, and there's, you know, several that do that.
Like a giant erector set.
Almost like a giant erector set. And my understanding is kind of the grandfather of these companies is the Bailey Bridge that our U.S. military...
World War II fame, absolutely.
Our U.S. military used as giant erector sets.
Yeah.
In battle and in combat. And so, unfortunately, we don't have any that will span the 322 feet, but if we put in a temporary pier, we think that's a potential option for doing that. The other option we're looking at is using commonly available engineering structural shapes. And the reason we want to do that is because to fabricate and special order something at this point is a very lengthy process. The steel has to be ordered, then it has to go to a fabricator, and then it has to be fabricated. So we're thinking to cut the time, we'll use very commonly available engineering shapes, steel beams, and be able to cut the time to put this span across. So that's kind of the two options that we're looking at right now. And we have two engineering firms that are already working on this for us. In addition to that, there's a couple other things that we're going to try to do to speed up construction of this span. One is, once our engineers have a more definite answer about where we're going to go, we may well pre-order the materials. When I say we, I mean the Transportation Cabinet, Department of Highways, so that when we do let this to contract, we'll already have the materials en route or on hand, and so the contractor won't have to do that. And the second thing that we're going to try to put into the contract is an incentive clause for getting done early, and that would be a X number of dollars per day for every day that is finished before our specified completion date.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I heard some conversation about is that there is a new bridge scheduled to go in there, 4-lane bridge to connect the 4-lane through LBL, and there was some speculation on the part of we lay folk that maybe they would just start work on the new bridge and just let this other one go. Was that ever considered?
That was something that we looked at briefly in the beginning of this. The reality is that bridge is still in the design phase. And so we don't have 100% design to build that bridge. So
we have, by the way, while we're talking, an image of this bridge, and it's beautiful. It really is. And tell us the type of bridge it is.
Sure. Well, this bridge is called a basket handle tied arch. Obviously, it looks like a basket handle because you see the two sides come together.
You pick it up.
Just like you carry a basket.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really like about it is the arch shape, because the existing bridge has somewhat of an arch shape with this Parker Truss that it has, and so it's kind of a nod to the tremendously long and reliable service of the bridge that we could use prior to January 26th.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a target date on the, you're still in the design stage,
right,
but just, is there a target date on when you all would like to have this new bridge finished?
We haven't set a target date, and the reason for that is this bridge, because of its design, is considered a unusual structure. And what happens with those is the design for that is going to have to go to the Federal Highway Administration in Washington, their bridge office, and they're going to have to do a review of that design. Mm-hmm. And it's unclear to us how long that review will take, whether that's 30 days, 60, 180 days. And so we're a little reluctant to, once you start throwing dates out there, people understandably
circle those on the calendar.
People understandably expect you to meet those schedules.
Now, I'm assuming there's also a 4-lane bridge plan for the other side there at Canton.
Yes, and what is going to be extremely unique about these bridges is basically they're going to be bookends. They're going to look, the main span is going to be absolutely identical for both of those bridges. It may be unique in the world to have bridges of that size separated by 7 miles of LBL.
Yeah.
And so we're really excited about these projects. Each bridge is fully funded in our 6-year highway plan, and each bridge is expected to cost $165 million. So we're the silver lining is we have replacement bridges in the works, and of course the other good news is no one was hurt or killed during this incident.
Absolutely.
That's just really miraculous.
It is. And on that topic, we were talking before the program about weight limits, specifically on the Tennessee River Bridge between Ledbetter and Reedland. And I think people need to understand that when you all put a weight limit, that's not a suggestion. You're not kidding about that. Address the seriousness of that point.
Well, it is extremely serious. We have bridge inspectors that work out of our office here in Paducah, and they are very highly trained. They're very highly experienced. They all go through standardized training to be able to evaluate these bridges. And so we don't take it very lightly when we go out and post a bridge with a reduced weight limit. So I think it's very important for your viewers to understand and share with their friends and neighbors is these weight limits do mean something, and they are absolute weight limits, and that's what we mean. And with the Tennessee River Bridge in particular, we're extremely concerned that if vehicles continue to violate the weight limit, that we'll have no choice for the safety of the people that use that bridge to shut it down. And so we would like to get that message out. These weight limits are real, they mean something, and they are absolute.
And they're enforced. We were talking earlier about, I saw an article in the Livingston County paper about a truck that was said to have been 50,000 pounds over the limit, and he was stopped for that. and that just astonished me. I mean, with a 3-ton limit, and he is that's 25 tons over the limit. It's terrifying to think what could have happened.
Well, and the point that we're trying to make is these weight limits are serious, and they're so serious, in fact, we are going to enter into an agreement with the state police and commercial vehicle enforcement to be out there, and the transportation cabinet's going to pick up the bill for paying for that, because, you know, I think it's important that we keep this Tennessee River Bridge open for passenger car traffic because of so many people that commute in and out of McCracken County.
Wow. And if that bridge were out of commission,
it would be a
and then you've got Egner's Ferry Bridge out of commission. I don't know how you would deal with that. How you would get across the river there?
It would be an extreme hardship.
It would.
And so we're gonna pay for law enforcement there.
Right.
The other thing you might have read about in the news or newspaper, which I wanted to make about the Egner's Ferry Bridge, is we are in the planning process of having a ferry service there and putting that into operation until we can get the repairs made.
Well, now how will that work? Because in looking at that, I think from the Fenton side, you've got a pretty much ready-made ferry landing, that old airstrip coming around. But on the other side, the Aurora side, wouldn't that require some dredging and some work? That's interesting. Tell us about that.
Well, what we think we can do, and obviously it's an idea we're still evaluating, but we think that we can use the existing boat ramp at Ken Lake as a potential entry and exit point for the ferry. It's a fairly wide boat ramp, and we're not going to probably need the full width of that for a ferry. So we think perhaps that we can have joint use of that with the fishermen and be able to run a ferry operation at Ken Lake. And as you say, we got a great landing site over on the LBL side at Fenton.
Where would you get the ferry boat?
Well, what would happen is we would let a contract for the operation of a ferry boat. And so what we would do is we would specify we would like to have this ferry operation be able to move so many cars per hour. And then it will kind of be up to the people that bid on the contract to decide, do I want to run one boat with that full capacity, or do I want to have 2 boats with half that capacity, or 3 boats with 1/3 of that capacity? So we're going to leave a lot of flexibility up to those, and there are several companies that have already contacted us interested in helping us.
Well, Keith and I were talking, of course I'm an old newspaper guy and he's an old television guy. We were talking about there were some ferries on Lake Champlain that he mentioned. There were icebreaker ferries, big ferries. Are they part of the mix in this?
Probably the ferries aren't going to be able to be extremely large just because of being able to navigate in and out.
Well, he admits, because we were talking, Lake Champlain being a glacier lake is extremely deep.
Right.
In fact, that would probably be almost like an ocean-going vessel. But with these
would
rivers here are so shallow, well, the only ferry operating in this area I get on the Ohio is the Caven Rock Ferry, and that's a very small vessel, and it can take a limited number of cars. Would it be larger than that, you think?
Yes, I would think so. I think we're looking, right now, the numbers we're looking at, we'd like to be able to move something like, we haven't decided on the exact number, but we're thinking in the 120 to 150 cars per hour range. Again, we can't get too large because of the maneuvering areas into Ken Lake boat ramp, and then on the other side too, there's not a huge amount of width, even though it is a good place to have a ferry operation.
And I would think that the great majority of vehicles would be passenger cars. Trucks don't, do you get much truck traffic that way?
Well, actually there is quite a bit of
really?
truck traffic that way, because it cuts quite a few miles off from having to come down I-24.
Right.
But, the current thinking on a ferry is probably not have any vehicles with more than 2 axles. Just to cut down on the truck traffic. The primary focus would be moving passenger type cars, fishermen that are pulling their boats,
right.
smaller type vehicles.
Yeah. Well, I guess old Mr. Egner would be pleased to know his ferry may be operating again.
Very fascinating to hear, and I think some of the local media outlets have been talking about the Egner's ferry and how it started, and I guess his name was Milton.
It goes back before the Civil War, and that road through there, it's my understanding that, of course, there was a ferry at Columbus for years, which I had the pleasure of riding a few times in my youth. And it was a main road that went straight across the Jackson Bridge from Columbus through Mayfield over to Egner's Ferry, and then you went on east. It was a very well-traveled road. And again, let's talk about the history of the bridge. It was built in the early 30s.
I believe it started in 1932, which would make it, what, I guess 70 years
You're
old.
the engineer. I don't do math. You know, I'll take your word for it.
80 years old.
Yeah. And it was, originally it spanned the Tennessee River.
Exactly.
And then when Kentucky Lake was built, it was heightened.
It was raised, I believe that was in the mid-40s.
How do you heighten a bridge? How do you raise a bridge like that?
Well, it's interesting you should ask. You know, you have to take off the trusses, and then you have to add height to the piers. And you know, when you think about that happening in the mid-40s, that had been an almost incredible feat of engineering.
Oh yeah,
how they did that. I mean, that bridge is almost 3,500 feet long, and my understanding is almost all of it was modified to raise it enough to impound Kentucky Lake.
Right. Oh yeah. Now, was it a toll bridge originally?
I hear that it was. I don't know that.
I've heard stories
that it was
much
about it.
Was a toll bridge, and
I think it probably was in its early days.
Well, now was the Canton Bridge built about the same time?
The Canton Bridge, I believe, was built about the same time, and it also was raised. But I don't think Lake Barkley was impounded until the mid-60s.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. And you know, before that, that whole between the rivers area was bridgeless, and that was quite a feat to span that part of Kentucky.
I'm sure it was, especially really, with those two rivers that you've got to.
It's a peninsula.
It is.
It is when you think about it, and it's and again, I think that, as I said, I have been over that bridge more times than I count both of them, and I never thought about something like this happening. And I have done some canoeing on the Ohio and canoed under these bridges, and you'll see where there was maybe skint where a barge hit them. That's no big deal, but for a ship to be this out of position to hit this thing is it's incredible.
Well, it is, and those piers, you know, part of the design work and going into those piers is our engineers understand that vessels are going to hit those piers from time to time, and so they're designed to withstand that type of sudden impact.
Mm-hmm.
But a bridge, really there's three loads we're concerned about when we're talking about bridges. One of them's the dead load. That's just the actual physical weight of the bridge and all its components.
And what would the Egner's Ferry Bridge weigh approximately?
Well, I haven't added them all up, but we approximate that this one span that's missing now was a million pounds.
Wow.
So it's a lot.
And that's another point, and I think people are curious about. When I went over to look at it legally, I never got on the deck. I didn't do that. The deck of the bridge was draped over the bow of this ship, and it obviously went down in the water. This ship has anchors on it, but the anchors weren't dropped. So was the bridge superstructure, was that holding that ship in place?
What we understand is that the eastern part of the truss was embedded into the lake bed,
right,
and anchoring the vessel.
Right.
That's what we heard,
and
that's what we hear.
It seemed to be, and it was just incredible to see all this steel and asphalt. A million pounds of it was just astonishing.
I mean, it's like a scene out of a horror movie.
It is. It is. It really is.
One of those action movies.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
So, do you know how they freed the ship? I mean, they obviously cut the superstructure. Do you know how they did that? How they cut it away?
I really don't have a lot of details on it. I know the ship's owner submitted a salvage plan for approval to the Coast Guard. What I understand is they cut away the part of the truss that was embedded into the lake bed, and then of course they moved the Delta Mariner about a mile downstream, and then I guess cut the rest of the steel out from around it.
Do you know if they're going to let the steel just rest on the lake bed, or what they're going to do?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I would think that the regulatory agencies would want any debris removed.
They would pull it out
from Lake Barkley.
That would be quite a feat to pull it out with. How would they do that with?
I guess
take a lot of trucks.
I guess they'd use cranes.
Yeah, big cranes to do that.
I would think so.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just it's astonishing, the whole thing, and this is good information that you've given us about the ferry operation. Especially intrigues me, being a history teacher, thinking about old Mr. Egner's Ferry. So I guess they'll just call it Egner's Ferry again. They should if they.
I believe as a nod to history, that's probably.
I would hope
that
they
would probably be a.
Would there be a concern when the ferry opens with basically just sightseers coming to ride across it? Would that jam up traffic? I mean, is that a concern?
Well, what we engineers in the highway business are really concerned about a lot is those times of day when people are going to work and coming back from work. So probably for most of the traffic, they'll be early enough so that sightseers aren't out yet.
Right.
Typically, if you're a sightseer,
you
take your time getting up and getting out working. So, actually, I think it might be a marketing tool for local businesses in the area to say, hey, be part of something historic here.
Absolutely.
Because, first of all, we know that this ferry is going to have a limited time operation.
Absolutely.
Secondly, what a tremendous nod to our past.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're a history teacher, professor, I believe, and so
got to have at least an Egner. I rode the Egner's Ferry Bridge, Egner's Ferry T-shirts. You got to have that.
So we know how historic this crossing is.
Wow.
And the location.
Oh, I'll certainly go over and go across.
So yeah, I think we will have sightseers. But I mean, that'll be good for our local tourism.
That's
business anyway.
That's an excellent twist. Good way in the program where we're through. I'd like to invite you back later. We could talk more about this as things develop.
I'd love to come back, especially once we develop our repair plan, and we can be able to
you'll have a standing invitation for that.
Okay.
Anyway. Thank you for joining us. I'm Barry Craig. My guest was Jim LeFevre of the Kentucky Department of Highways. We'll see you next time.